basically 40 years ago, literally on the cusp of 40 years ago, that was the year I completed my high school education. I swear it was 82, but the people who I've checked with since say, no, you finished high school in 81. So literally 40 years ago, I finished my high school education. Now, you may believe that the diagnosis for autism has been a consistent thing since that time before or maybe a little bit after. Let me make it quite plain to you, it's not. I want to talk today about the idea. I've titled my piece Diagnosis Autism on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Monday, the 27th of December of 2021. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, and on YouTube. Thank you for coming along today. Remember, Rumble is my preferred platform. These days, I do put myself also on BitChute and CloutHub as well, so you can check me out there on the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on both of those. But the subject again for today is going to be Diagnosis Autism. Allow me very quickly to go through my notes, and then we'll discuss what it is that I'm saying, which I think will be quite clear from the notes, but you never know really how that is. There are a bunch of folks arguing that, quote, autism can't be hereditary because you don't see it in the familial history of autistic children. I wanted to take just a moment to talk about this idea. A recent rant I saw on the subject essentially said something like, the numbers 30 years ago were a tiny fraction of what's reported today. The ranter concluded this could not be the result of better diagnosis. As a person who lived through the time frame in question, up until the time that it became common to diagnose autism, allow me to take a moment to wax moderately eloquent on this statement. I'm one of those potential misdiagnoses. I've never been formally diagnosed with autism. If, as I suspect, I'm mildly autistic, getting a diagnosis today would serve largely to do just one thing. That would be to help to show the past underdiagnosis of autism. I want those of you over 30 to take a minute, and it's really probably a little bit older than that, over 40 probably, to take a moment and think back to your childhood. Do you remember that kid who didn't talk unless forced to do so, or maybe not at all? How about the socially awkward one? Remember the 2 or 3 kids you knew who had tutors and remedial classes? The possibility is quite good that some portion of these individuals were level 1 or mildly autistic. And the cousin you knew who was institutionalized for failure to thrive. When it appeared there was, quote, nothing wrong with them. Remember them? The possibility exists that person was level 2 or level 3, moderately or severely autistic. These days, we're leaps and bounds ahead of understanding and diagnosing and the diagnosis of autism. Diagnosing it right. The result being that my level 2, moderately autistic son sits in a normal school, albeit in a special needs classroom. That certainly was not the case in my childhood. The reality is it was less about diagnosis and more about recognition. They never even got to the diagnosis phase for many of these people. Or, if you will, failure to recognize back then. Don't think that's enough to make a difference. I pretty much promise you it is. And by the way, such folks are almost certainly better off, autistic people, in a variety of ways, including how productive they are as a result. Okay, there's my notes done. So let me go ahead and get on with it. Look, so there are a couple things that I thought of, and I'm probably going to space because I do this. But there are a couple of things that I thought of while I was talking about all of this. And naturally, they're evading me at the moment. But I want to say that you can say that the fact that there was no diagnosis. Okay, here's one of them. One of them has come back. You can say the fact that there was no diagnosis is because there weren't autistic people. But here's the thing. The vast majority, I believe, of autistic people are level 1 or mildly autistic. And it turns out that most of these people with no special treatment at all would be quote, relatively normal, end of quote, by the time they hit their teenage years. And you'd have no idea that these people were autistic at all. You would have no idea that their brains didn't work the same way. Those nerds who were constantly harping on whatever it was, whether it was Star Wars or Star Trek or what's the British one, Doctor Who, or whatever it happens to be, they were constantly harping on those. The ones who were way into Tolkien and were nerds in drama classes or music nerds or whatever. These people, many of them very likely are moderately autistic or mildly autistic. They're level 1 autistic. Okay, look, I'm not going to get into the statistical detail. There are other people I know who are taking the time to do that, and I'm very glad they are. I'm certainly not against that. I think, in fact, it's a very good thing. And that includes the history of the diagnosis of autism and so forth. I've said before, and I'll say again, I don't think autism is one thing. I want to make that perfectly plain. But that having been said, I want for you also to understand that that doesn't mean that there's not a sort of a generic thing that can be diagnosed and referred to as autism. And I think that the difference is largely that we used to look at people who were severe and say that person, or moderate, high moderate, right, and say that person is autistic if we even said that about them. They certainly were failing to thrive, and they certainly were institutionalized if they were severely autistic in many instances, and they were treated as that slow kid when they were moderately so. Mild kids, for the most part, they were socially awkward. They were people who were nerds or whatever, did things that you look at and you go, why is that person so interested in that thing or this thing, right? And they were looked at badly, oddly, whatever you want to say. I don't know what the numbers are for autism, and I think that there's a definite possibility for overdiagnosis of autism in the modern day. That having been said, I believe that the past diagnoses of autism were far under what actually existed. And I'm going to say this again. For most of the people who are mild to low moderate autism, that is level 1 to low level 2 autism, what probably will happen to that individual is they'll live a life where you have no idea that that person is autistic by the time they're 15 to 20 years of age. You won't have that knowledge because that person will have been given strategies to deal with a society they really don't fit in. That doesn't mean that they won't seem odd, and it doesn't mean they won't be socially awkward and so forth, and it doesn't mean they won't have learning disabilities to some degree that hopefully can be overcome early in life. But the point is, those individuals will not be a huge drain on society. Even my son with moderate to almost severe autism is not really a huge drain on society. He'll be a bigger, quote, drain on me, potentially, than anybody else, and I'll live with that, and I'll deal with it, and maybe he'll have to move on with somebody else when his old man, dies or whatever. But my point is, for the most part, the concept of the diagnosis of autism, particularly for mildly autistic people, even if they're trending or tending towards moderate or level 2 autism, the diagnosis of those people is not only not harmful, it's helpful because it makes them a person who will more likely fit into society. But if you think that because in time past, because 40 years ago, back when I was in high school, people were not being diagnosed, it means that, that we're having this explosion of autism today. I need to tell you that that's not the case. You're still not seeing a large number of either moderate or severe, that is level 2 or level 3 autism anywhere. It's just not happening. So most of them are mildly autistic, and I believe probably in past they just slipped on by and nobody really noticed that they were there. Well, they noticed, but not in a way that they actually diagnosed it as autism. That's what I would say. So if you're thinking that autism didn't exist in the same measure and to the same level that it does today when you were a kid, let me help you to understand. It's more likely you just didn't see it, and they're actually strategizing and doing things to make it so that autistic people are being dealt with today, as opposed to just letting them sink or swim in the society they find themselves in. Okay, I need to go ahead and wrap this up. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, Tom Kurt. Today is Monday, the 27th of December of 2021. That means tomorrow will be Tuesday, the 28th of December of 2021. Moving ever closer to the middle of the week, moving ever closer to the end of the year. Welcome to everyone who's been here, and thank you again for everyone who's been here on Rumble, the podcast, YouTube, BitChute, or Cloud Hub. Thank you for coming along today. Remember, Rumble at this point is still my preferred platform. If you like what I do on any of those platforms, so on Rumble, you can give me a boxing glove, which is a rumble. You can give me a plus, which is a positive feedback. You can give me a minus, which is a negative one. You can give me a thumbs up on YouTube, which is a like, or a thumbs down on YouTube, where you show that you dislike what it is that I'm doing. On the other two platforms, you can give me whatever they have for a like or a dislike. On any platform where I place my content, remember that you can comment if comments are available. And if comments exist, I will do everything that I can, particularly if I'm notified of them, to look at them, to try and understand what it is that you're trying to say, and reply if I feel like it's an appropriate thing to do. The subject for today has been diagnosis autism, and tomorrow we're going to talk about poor Jesus. And this is based on something I saw Dinesh D'Souza talk about, where he answered what is considered the atheist question of why was Jesus born in the time that he was. And I want to bring some things to bear and to light that I think are important, that I don't think he did as good a job of as I'd like for him to have done. He did okay. He did a good job. He just didn't do it as well as I'd like for him to have done it. Okay. Thank you for coming along again. Hope that you're having a good day. Hope everything is going well for you, and hopefully we will see you again on Tuesday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Monday, the 27th of December of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.